You are at the League of Women Voter of California's California Housing Crisis, Policy Barriers and Solutions. We have a great group of panelists here, but a couple of housekeeping notes. First, I should introduce myself. I'm Terry Newstetter, and I am the chair of the League's state group on housing and homelessness. And we were very excited to get our esteemed panelists to participate this evening. And with the amount of participants we have, this seems to be a very hot topic for everyone right now. Everyone's wondering, how are we going to get 2 million more homes, and how are we going to pay for them, and all kinds of things. So first of all, I wanted to let you know that if you can put your questions in the chat, don't raise your hand, just put them in the chat. And at the end of all three presentations, we will be able to kind of consolidate them and ask them openly and have more of a back and forth at that point in time. And both Savannah and I will be working on that. And then I'm going to give you a little bit about our panelists, as well as kind of what you're going to hear about tonight. So let me introduce first Corey Smith. He is the executive director of the Housing Action Coalition, and that is in the Bay Area. He is going to look at our current landscape and how we got here in this predicament in California. He is a Bay Area native, and he has just lots of different backgrounds, only with the Housing Action Coalition, where he's the executive director, and he'll tell you a little more about that. But that's a wide-ranging member group that has about 20 plus different industries involved, and they advocate for more housing. And they are looking to solve California's displacement and affordability problems, more homes at all income levels. Corey has been at HAC since 2016 in a variety of roles, but assumed the executive director in 2022. He's also been a digital media consultant, a data analyst at Rocket Lawyer, and an NBA scout for the Orlando Magic. Our next panelist is going to talk about successes, what's working, some of the legislation that we've had. And Norina Limon is the CEO of Casita Coalition. She has 16 years of experience in government, public policy, and the private sector, bringing all those pieces together to lead efforts to address California's housing crisis through policy advocacy and community engagement. Before she started with the Casita Coalition, she founded the Mariposa Strategies, which is a strategic guidance gave strategic guidance to nonprofits, governments, and private organizations on the housing front, and really, as well as addressing racial wealth gaps and home ownership, kind of looking at all of those elements. And in 2023, she was appointed to the board of the California Housing Finance Agency, and also served as a fellow at some place that we know pretty well, UC Berkeley's Turner Center. So she will tell you more about Casita, because they do lots and lots of different things. I can't sum it up correctly. And then Cesar Covarrubias, he is the executive director of the Kennedy Commission, and that is in Orange County. And he's going to talk about how we move forward, everything from funding to how we implement and messaging to get more folks into the pro-housing space. Cesar manages and provides strategic leadership in the Commission's advocacy and their programs to increase affordable housing opportunities and improve the stability of lower income families in Orange County. But Cesar has lots of experience in a range of nonprofit management, affordable housing policy, and before that, he even worked as a case manager at the Fair Housing Council of Orange County, looking at housing discrimination cases and assisting clients with landlord-tenant issues. So these guys have been all over the place and know this inside and out. And so we are very happy to have them to talk to us this evening. And with that, I'm going to let Corey kick us off. and start telling us a little bit about where we came from.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Terry and Savannah, my fellow panelists, and everybody else for being here tonight and your involvement in this process, because it is obviously a challenge that is facing the state of California housing, and it's been something that's been building up for decades. So hopefully, what I'm going to do is actually look back a little bit and try to bring folks up to speed and sort of lay a foundation for the conversation. And then the next two speakers are going to get into some nitty-gritty details and some of the successes and what we have ahead. And so just really appreciate everybody being here. We'll hop to the next slide. So Corey Smith, I'm the executive director of the Housing Action Coalition. We got founded in the late 90s to be a member-supported organization that supports building more housing across California for residents at all income levels. So we do everything from homeless supportive housing, low income, deed restricted affordable, middle income, affordable, and market rate. So we advocate for the broad housing types, multifamily, ADUs. The only thing we really don't touch is single family home sprawl development. Our members don't really build that, but anything that's urban infill, generally speaking, we're big advocates of more options for people, and funded by the industry, the developers, the architects, the land use attorneys, the labor unions, the urban livability groups, people who build housing for a living, as well as the major employers. And we believe at our core, we have a housing shortage, which is causing a displacement and affordability crisis. And so our vision for what we want to be doing going forward is really embracing growth, prioritizing that sustainability, and advancing social equity. And we believe, just at its core, the reason that this is as big of a problem as it is a matter of political will. I like to point out that the Egyptians, thousands of years ago, built multifamily urban infill housing. So we can do it if we wanted to, and we are trying to move in that direction. And if you go to the next slide, the state has made that clear. Since 2016, we are in the triple digits, hundreds of laws that have been passed in the state of California, signed by then Governor Brown, now Governor Newsom, in a variety of different areas, trying to untangle this mess that we are in as a state. And when you jump to the next slide, we sort of look at the solutions in one of four different areas. So there's process reform, which is often thought of as things like CEQA reform or permitting reform. And our focus, as you can see, is really just about getting that process a little more efficient within governments, right? So we can go from point A to point B and get a shovel on the ground as fast as we possibly can. Then there's building and planning code reform. So these are the actual rules themselves. Think about things like zoning and density limits, what we can build, where we can build it, and what tweaks need to be made in order to allow us to get more housing produced across all income levels. Financing and fees. I joke that this is the money stuff, and this is everything from project feasibility, which is really, really important for projects to actually pencil, is the terminology we have, across to funding for affordable housing. We are just drastically underfunded for the amount of housing you need. Our target is around $20 billion is what we believe we need annually at this point in time to be catching up on our low-income housing production, because we are so far behind. So just the finances of this really, really matter. And then the last section, if you're familiar with what was called the 3Ps framework, we really do want to talk about the preservation and protections. We're big supporters of home ownership opportunities as well, because at the end of the day, people are really at the core of all of this stuff. And so I say that I'm not actually interested in units in developments. I'm more interested in homes for people. And so we want to make sure that we are people-centric, not only in the policies that we pass and understanding what are the good and bad things that can happen, mitigate negative impacts, but also in simply our messaging and how we talk about this with people. People are at the core of this. So we really want to make sure that we can be a people-centered organization so we can actually improve the lives of California residents across the board. So I'm going to touch, when you jump to the next slide here, on something that I know it's a slightly more engaged audience, and I'm guessing many of you have heard about this concept called housing elements. So in the simplest possible way, housing elements are required in every city across the state of California and it's more or less their plan to build. And each city is required to put forward their housing element, their plan, to the state of California, and it will show the state, and it is the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, that has to sign off on how each city will hit their housing goals. The housing element is very comprehensive. It is not just the production, but there's all sorts of things in there about tenant protections and small business, and it really is, in fact, that, the game plan. For a very long time, housing elements did not actually matter. They were a performative process that if a city put it forward and did not actually do the things that they said they were going to do, nothing would actually happen. That changed in 2017 with a bill from Senator Wiener, Senate Bill 828, which says if a city is either not compliant with their housing element, or if they were not meeting their housing targets, the quantifiable goals at different income levels, then there was actually going to be some additional tools that the state was going to provide local cities to meet those numbers. And so jump to the next slide, and this is as graphy and processy as I'm possibly going to get, but I actually think it's important to sort of explain how we got to these numbers. So it started by having the Department of Finance, a state agency, work with HCD and something called the Council of Governments to determine the need for housing in California at every income level. And then all those regional governments, so in the Bay Area, it's the Association of Bay Area Governments, or ABAG, says, okay, we have the total number for the region as a whole, and then we're going to distribute those numbers to each individual city. Then each individual city has to come up with their housing element plan, present it to the state signs off, and then hopefully we can start to produce the amount of housing that we need. And again, this was not a process for a very long time that actually had any teeth or any real consequences. We are currently in what we call the sixth RHNA cycle, or the sixth housing element cycle, an 8-year period between 2023 and 2031, where cities have new targets that they need to hit in terms of housing production. And if you jump to the next slide, it matters. And there's an organization out there, allied organization called YIMBY Action, which has this cohort called the Campaign for Fair Housing Elements, with the goal of ensuring that each city is actually doing what they said that they're going to do. And so what you see here is a map, I think this was now late last week, where blue cities are in compliance with their housing elements, meaning they are they've submitted their plan to the state of California. The state of California has signed off on it, and they are proceeding. There are some cities that are not compliant with their housing elements. And then there's some gray areas in the middle and different things that are challenging, and we can get into a couple of those. The main issue for a city that is not compliant with their housing element, something comes into effect called the builder's remedy, which effectively says that a city cannot reject a housing project based on zoning. So if a local jurisdiction's local zoning does not fit with whatever a project is proposing, in a residential area only, the project can basically apply anyway, and the city's not allowed to reject it because of its zoning. It's designed to be an incentive to make sure that cities actually submit good plans. That is a little different than what happens if it's not meeting their actual numbers themselves, and we'll get to that in a minute. So if you jump to the next slide, we have a couple of cities that are potentially not too thrilled with us. We have filed lawsuits against both the city of San Mateo and the city of Lafayette, both Bay Area cities. And the substance of these lawsuits are the fact that cities submit a number of sites, actual addresses, that they say are likely to turn into housing projects. And we've done a lot of research, done a lot of coordination with different property owners, and we have found that these two cities have a number of sites on their housing element list that, quite frankly, we don't believe, for a variety of reasons, are likely to turn into housing projects. And so we have filed litigation against both these cities with the simple ask of, we want you to submit the sites needed to actually hit the housing numbers that the state is looking to you to build. And those are both going through a process right now. And if you jump to the next slide, this is, I think, a really key piece to the entire conversation around housing. And when you get into the narrative and the dialogue, it's this battle and this tension between state and local control. And in our minds, the housing element process is really about threading that needle between state mandates to build more housing with the local expertise about how it should be done. Minimum standards, the RHNA numbers, the Regional Housing Need Allocation numbers, are required. That is sort of the state mandate saying yes or no is no longer on the table. You do need to build, and you need to build this many homes. But the idea of a local jurisdiction is going to be best suited to figure out where it should go, what the design standards should be, what other pieces are important to making sure that each individual housing project is successful. That still exists on a local level, and that's really important. And we want local jurisdictions to be able to best implement their own plans that fit what they need to be doing to be successful as a city. But again, the yes or no is no longer an option here. So when you jump to the next, what happens if a city is not compliant, right? So that is the builder's remedy process. And this is, for the most part, actually something we've really tried to avoid. I know many cities were frankly unaware that this housing element process was going to be different than previous housing element processes. But the overwhelming majority of cities in the state of California are compliant right now. And it is certainly our hope that every city in the state of California has a good plan to produce the amount of housing that we need. When you jump to the next slide, this is the flip side to that. So what if we have a situation where your plan is good, but at the end of the day, you're not actually meeting the housing targets? What happens at that point in time? Well, there's a variety of reasons that a city may not be meeting their housing targets. Right now, most builders are faced with feasibility challenges. The cost of materials, additional taxes and tariffs are just rendering projects infeasible. So while the plan itself is strong, there's just frankly some broader market forces that are making it really, really difficult to build. So if the city's plan is in place, but not leading to the production numbers that we're aiming for halfway through the cycle, so this will be in 2027, then another bill, Senate Bill 423, would kick in, which provides a ministerial as-of-right process for code-compliant projects. And there are labor standards associated with this as well. So in normal human speak, what that means is if a city is not meeting its housing targets, the housing numbers, any project that follows all of the rules, so it follows the zoning rules locally, any density rules that you have locally, anything related to fees, all of those pieces, you follow every single objective standard that a city has, then the project can be approved ministerially or with no public vote. There's different tiers of labor standards in this, depending on project size. Very small projects do not have any sort of requirements, but once you get over 10 units, prevailing wage requirement kicks in, and then further up, additional healthcare and apprenticeship programs also kick in. And so this was through a long discussions over a number of years in Sacramento, again, with the goal of trying to provide cities with a tool to actually get the housing built they need if they are behind. Every city in the state of California, that 2027 timeline exists, except for the city of San Francisco, which is actually on a different timeline. And San Francisco's clock has actually already run out. San Francisco runs on a 2-year evaluation period, 2023, 2024. So these rules are actually already in effect in San Francisco, and 423 projects can move forward here today. And so, again, this is a little bit of the background of some of the rules that are in place that can hopefully help set a good foundation, and looking forward to the rest of the presentations and discussion.
Thanks, Corey. That was great. Narina.
Thank you,
CEO of
Terry.
Casita Coalition, take it over. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Corey, for that. Just wait till the presentation is loaded. All right. So first of all, I'm so thrilled to be here with the League of Women Voters. You all are a group that fully understands that civic leadership starts with strong communities. And a critical part of that is just has to be solving our housing supply crisis. So today I want to take you all on a journey about how small changes, something as unassuming as backyard housing, ADUs, are quickly but powerfully rebuilding housing opportunity in California. Next slide. I'm the CEO of Casita Coalition, which is a nonprofit focused on unlocking middle housing. So these are middle homes between single family homes and large apartment buildings. So ADUs, plexes, cottage clusters, townhomes. And we do this through our coalition by connecting advocates, builders, industry professionals, innovators, policymakers, and homeowners. Next slide, please. We're also proudly behind California's ADU boom. Our ethos has been to be practical, to focus on removing barriers and implementation, and we believe that the best solutions are created through a broad coalition. Next slides. So let me start off by reinforcing why middle housing. Middle housing is neighborhood scale. It fits naturally into neighborhoods throughout the state. It can make homeownership more affordable and accessible. It's affordable by design. So for example, an ADU is 30 to 60% cheaper to build than a new single family home. And it also offers opportunities for new and diverse developers. So it's a way to make the housing industry more inclusive. Next slide. And this is a little bit into what Corey was alluding to in terms of how we got here. You know, housing wasn't always this hard to build. We know that middle housing has long been a part of the American landscape. I think homes like duplexes and townhomes and bungalow courts and just other neighborhood scale homes were historically allowed, but families from all economic backgrounds were, able to access different homes to fit their needs. But the decades of exclusionary zoning and over 100 years of governmental focus on those single detached houses have really limited available housing options. So starting in 2016, we chipped away at barriers. We started with allowing ADUs, and it was the beginning of a quiet revolution. The next slide. And before I begin, I also want to underscore that building middle housing complements, it doesn't replace efforts to build traditional, publicly subsidized, affordable housing. We need everything always, all at once, because we have such a gigantic problem that we all need to work on this problem from all ends. Next slide. So how do we do this? We didn't swing for the fences on day one. We made strategic incremental changes, so small reforms that added up to massive change. By building broad coalitions and staying focused, we kept moving forward even when it wasn't easy. So in 2016 and 2017, the founders of Casita Coalition were part of the push for the following reforms: allowing for ADUs on existing properties, prohibiting preventative zoning requirements, reducing parking requirements, or those that were required by right permitting for ADUs, or reducing fees for structures under 750 square feet. And then at the same time, there was a massive investment by CalHFA and the governor to spur the production of ADUs to benefit low to moderate income homeowners. This unlocked the ADU revolution. Next slide. And each year, the housing advocacy movement, organizations throughout the state dedicated to solving our housing supply crisis, kept expanding opportunities, from duplex lot splits, higher ADU height limits, legalization, pathways for unpermitted ADUs. It wasn't flashy work, but incrementalism has worked in California, particularly when it comes to ADUs. I did include in the next slide, I included 2 slides here that I'm going to bypass real quick, but it's for all of you to look at. But it really shows just all of the enormous amount of ADU bills that came out in the legislature. That really shows just how much we chipped away at barriers little by little. And I saw a question in the Q&A that talked about what are some of the new regulations that are coming up in 2025, because there's always new regulations. The number of regulations is massive, of new changes is massive, and we're happy to share our PDF that shows all of the changes. But I do want to highlight a few. There's increased flexibility for multifamily ADUs. There's improved consistency for legalization of unpermitted ADUs using health and safety standards. There's also streamlining for small lot subdivisions, cleanup for urban lot splits, and 2-unit development standards. So happy to share that afterwards. But if we can go to the next slide, right here. So proof in all of this incrementalism is that it's working. ADU permits have skyrocketed by 450% since 2017, making it one of the most successful housing policies in California with little public subsidy. So in cities like Long Beach, ADUs make up 66% of all new homes built. And LA has had the most ADU permits out of the entire state. And I think what's important to underscore in the story of LA is that the ideas about ADUs came from working class communities of color that have been converting garages, that have been building homes that they need in their backyard for decades. And a lot of the boom that LA saw is just the legalization or the permitting of unpermitted ADUs, of informal housing that had been around for a long time. And next slide, please. And now we have uniform standards in 450 cities and 58 counties. 21 of all permits in 2023 were for ADUs. And we have a new 8 billion industry fueling jobs and innovation. So this means more neighbors, more options, and more affordability. We can go to the next slide. And then next slide. The next frontier that the Casita Coalition has engaged in is tackling something that Corey brought up, which is homeownership. Starter homes are almost non-existent in California. And one of the things that we've been targeting is we've gotten ideas from elsewhere. Places like Austin, places like Portland and Seattle have been doing this. British Columbia have been doing this for a while, but it's the condoization of ADUs. So we worked to remove the barrier at the state level, and now cities are opting in to allow for ADUs to be converted into condos, creating, probably once we have full implementation of this initiative, will be probably the only starter home supply in the state of California. We have cities like San Jose, who was the first city to opt in, and we're seeing other cities trickle in. We're seeing a lot of cities that are right now agendizing the issue and are getting close to ensuring that they opt in for the condoization of ADUs, but it's an exciting innovation that we're watching closely and working actively on the implementation efforts. So we go to the next slide. We've already seen success stories in places like Portland, where a 2-bedroom ADU sells for half the price of a standard home. The next slide. Our philosophy at Casita Coalition is that you remove barriers as you find them. So zoning is just the first barrier. Once you fix zoning, then you see the next challenges. So things like financing, appraisals, knowledge gaps, issues around equity. And here's the truth, only scale, so meaning lots of cities changing at once, can unlock the full system. So removing the first generation barriers and then focusing on second generation barriers, we think that's applicable to all housing reforms in our efforts to increase the amount of homes and increase affordability. Next slide. We've passed a massive amount of housing bills in California, but at Casita Coalition, we wholeheartedly believe that in order to turn legislation into actual homes being built, we need major implementation efforts. We work with cities, with counties, with homeowners to work with them on how to actually implement these changes. From working with local governments, with practitioner working groups, helping nonprofits build programs, to regulatory reform, every barrier removed is a door opened. Next slide. This is new for the majority of homeowners. Construction costs, confusing permits, financing gaps, they all add up. And so confusion over what professionals to pick, how to become a landlord, tenant rules. We need to give people the tools and the knowledge and support to succeed in these efforts. Next slide. And then next slide again. And so as part of the implementation efforts, we provide a 4-week virtual course on everything you need to know on how to build an ADU. We have a monthly basics workshop also to provide foundational knowledge and updates on how it relates to local and state law in California. We help homeowners understand the full costs, all the processes, what are the financing options, questions they should be asking, geared towards ensuring that homeowners can build backyard housing so that they can be part of the backyard revolution, they can build wealth and contribute to solving our housing gap. So the course is also geared towards professionals on how to navigate specific projects and work with their cities and their counties. These are unbiased, instructor-led courses that also create a learning environment and a mastermind of communities. Next slide. We also partnered with Zillow to work on creating the playbook on how to pass successful zoning reform, how to pass successful middle housing reforms. And we use the best practices of states like Oregon, Washington, California, Montana, places in British Columbia, New Zealand, and what are all the connective tissues that bind all of these various states, what are the strategies that all of these states issue to pass successful reform, from messaging to the coalitions, to the strategy, to the effective policies to ensure that the policies actually translate to units being built. So our goal is to equip the next generation of advocates and work with cities and states across the country to ensure that we're not reinventing the wheel and we're doing what works. Next slide. And we have a lot of guidebooks on our website, so we encourage all of you to look through them. Everything from rebuilding after the fire, lessons from Sonoma County, to all of the various implementation guidebooks from all of the changing and new legislation that has been implemented over the past few years. Next slide. And that's it. Join us go to casitacoalition.org for more information. Follow us on our social media, and we're just excited to be a part of the movement and to keep working with all of you on solving this enormous crisis that we have at hand. So thank you.
Thanks, Serena. That was great. Now we're going to turn it over to Cesar. He is with the Kennedy Commission, and he's going to lead us to the end into questions.
Great. Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Cesar Covarrubias with the Kennedy Commission. I just want to start by thanking all of you for being here today, and also Corey and Arena for their incredible presentations that are helping us understand this issue that is very complex. We are seeing opportunities that need to be created in every single category, and I want to focus a little bit of my time on a couple of items, specifically on the very low income population, which is one of the more challenging areas of work and some of the toughest housing to be built because of the lack of subsidy, the lack of competition on properties to develop, and a variety of other reasons. But if we can go to the next slide, I'll just tell you a bit about the Commission. We work on increasing affordable housing opportunities and housing stability for low-income families. And we also try to accomplish this by creating systemic change in housing policy and political will through advocacy, public policy, and community engagement. Next. Well, I want to give you some context as to when we talk about affordable housing, what does that mean? At the Kennedy Commission, we're trying to serve extremely low-income individuals. Usually, it was individuals making $30,000 or less. So here's a chart that shows you the median income for Orange County. This is from the Department of Housing and Community Development. They have it for every single county through the state. It's updated usually April, May of every year. And this will give you some context in terms of when you hear low income for a family of 4 in our county here in Orange County, like most coastal cities, someone making $126,000 is considered low income. So those are individuals that potentially could buy a home, potentially could benefit from the work that Norina is doing with the ADU conversions to condos. But when we focus on our work, we're focusing on the extremely low, acutely low, and very low. So usually families making $50,000 or less in Orange County, which are not going to be, unfortunately, in line to buying a home. And you have a typical rent in Orange County for about $4,000 for a 2-bedroom. It's a bit challenging for them to be able to think about home ownership when they're trying to survive, right? Next. So just a quick wrap on where California has been in terms of looking at its priorities for addressing the affordable housing and homelessness crisis that we have been facing for many years. And Corey's slide amplified a lot of the tools that the state has been using. We usually look at this as the state has been looking at streamlining and buy right policies, which are trying to increase housing supply at all income levels. For affordable housing, it's been annual allocations to key housing programs and new state laws that are also trying to incentivize affordable housing. And when we look at the unhoused, the main tool has been permanent supportive housing through key programs like Project Home Key and Room Key, which are designed to really take motels, for example, and converting those to affordable housing with strong services for the unhoused. A big part that already Corey discussed has been the state's approach to looking at housing elements as contracts. Housing elements, housing plans have commitments, and then the enforcement of those commitments is key to ensure that every city in California does its part. Next. So as Corey mentioned earlier, these are the key elements of a housing plan, the housing element, assessment of housing needs, an inventory of sites, policies and programs to respond to housing at all income levels, and to address the regional housing needs. Next. So I'm just giving you a quick overview of what that means here in Orange County. For us, this planning period, which was in our case, 2021 through 29, we have to plan for 183,000 units, and it's divided among these income categories. And I want to emphasize that state law requires that we plan for it. It doesn't require that we build it. So that's a big issue that we all have to work on to ensure that there's accountability and that these programs and sites are meaningful, as was discussed earlier, to ensure that there's a higher likelihood that development happens. Next one. So Corey touched upon this already. This is a chart that we developed just showing kind of the roadmap of how cities get certified, get their plan certified. It'll be in the packet that it'll be distributed. We can go on to the next slide. So for us, compliance of affordable housing programs is key through the housing element. So for us, we are tracking who in our city, in our county, has been certified. We have 35 jurisdictions, 26 have been certified. 5 of them are not compliant, which means they're not close to getting into compliance, or we're still working on it. And then we have 4, which is a different category of which we call pending rezoning. So they've done everything except they can't get into compliance until they rezone sites for affordable housing. The next slide will also just give you a graphic for our county, who's in compliance and who we're still working with. Next slide. So here's where I think are the opportunities. As we discussed, there's these housing plans, housing elements, and it really is about making sure that the housing elements create affordable housing, create market rate housing, create new opportunities for ADUs and everything else that we think is important as a strategy. But this only happens if there's groups like us, Corey's, Arenas, and advocates like all of you here on this Zoom call to ensure that there is actually compliance with the commitments that cities made, that there is the ability to recognize that cities have to be accountable to citizens, to organizations, to the state, to the Attorney General. There's different processes. We can't expect the Attorney General and HCD, the State Department of Housing and Community Development, to know what's happening in every single city. We have over 500 cities in the state, and it's impossible for them to know that. And in most cases, the state HCD department and the department, the Attorney General's office work off referrals, or they may hear something off the news. So it's imperative that a lot of us, including advocates, are well-positioned and know what's going on in their cities to be able to elevate these issues to the state or to other partner organizations. Corey mentioned California IMBY is doing a lot of work in this space statewide, and there's other organizations. I guarantee you there's an organization in your city or in your county that's working on these issues. It's connecting with them to ensure that we are making these housing elements meaningful tools that are not sitting on the shelf, but actually are going to be producing housing. So we do this through a process of where we look at the implementation of housing element commitments. We look at their housing elements, we draw out all their commitments, and then we work with the cities to monitor their policy progress. And every year, the cities have to report to the state what their progress has been. It's called an annual progress report. So we monitor those to ensure that there is compliance on some of these commitments. And then we're working with each city to ensure that there's a timeline for them to do their commitment on sites, rezonings, to also implement policies that they said they would be able to do. And we're also monitoring the sites that they said were available for affordable housing to ensure that those are still available, that they're not just being developed with market rate housing and the city has no capacity to develop affordable housing. Next slide. Here's some tips on what we do here locally. We look at city council and planning commission meetings. Our staff will look at all the agendas, we'll track the information that's happening that's relevant to housing, affordable housing development. And then we also have site trackers where we are identifying the key opportunity sites and we're following up on those with the cities. So it's important to ensure that you're engaged with your city. A couple of examples of where we have seen some success in doing this work in this current planning period is we have a couple of cities, Aliso Viejo, Anaheim, and San Juan Capistrano, and they all committed to doing certain things. For example, Anaheim said they were doing the inclusionary housing ordinance. We went through that process. There was public hearings. It was adopted. And now the city is moving forth with implementing that. We're also tracking what's called surplus sites that the state or the cities may have. And those are key opportunities for development of housing, including affordable housing. And compliance with the Surplus Land Act is something that we also are engaging in. Next slide. This is just an example of our policy tracker where we've taken out from each of the cities their commitments that they said they would do in this housing element in terms of policies and the time frame. So this is very useful for us to be able to then understand what they committed to doing, where they're at, have they completed that or not. And we provide this to our working groups. The way we work here in Orange County is we work with every city. We try to develop a working group of advocates, stakeholders, and then we meet with the city staff to try and address the timelines, the commitments on these, and what's going to happen in what schedule. And then we engage with our advocates and residents to ensure that there's also conversations happen with elected officials, planning commissioners, and others who are going to play a key role on this. And then ultimately, ongoing communication with the state to ensure that there's also pressure from the state on these timelines. Next. We talked a bit about some of the work that we do through city by city working groups, regular check-ins with the city staff, also collaborative workshops on a variety of affordable housing topics, and then collecting data. It's really important to be able to collect data to track the progress and then be able to tell the story of what's happening in your county, in your city, or what's not happening. And then working collaboratively on the advocacy implementation. Next slide. This is just another example of a sites inventory. We're doing the same thing. Like these are the sites that the city committed as key sites where development will happen. So we have all the information and we're trying to track those to ensure that housing is being developed on those. Next. A couple of things that our staff has done is they worked on mapping all the affordable housing sites in our county, and also religious sites that are very important because the state just passed a new state law called SB4, where now you can develop affordable housing on sites that are religious, with religious institutions. So if you go to the next slide, there's a couple of workshops that our staff had already done and will continue to do, just to inform the community and stakeholders that these are key opportunities for developers, for affordable housing advocates to identify sites in your city where you can say, hey, there's a site that maybe I go to this church and this church has an abundance of land that they're not using. Maybe there's an opportunity to connect with developers and advocates and be able to create an affordable housing site. Next one. So just a quick wrap I'm giving you data from my county because this is what I have relevant to me, but this is an example of what's happening statewide. So we have this RENA process 2021 through 29. There's already reports from 21 through 23. This is a way you can track progress in your city and be able to understand what type of development is happening. On the first bar chart, there are two kind of categories for affordable housing reporting. Some of it is deed restricted affordable housing, which means that there are covenants that they're going to be affordable for 55 years. And there's also non-deed restricted, which means the city or somebody has identified those as affordable, but they're not deed restricted. So that rent could change tomorrow, or that affordability for purchase could change tomorrow because there is no restriction on the units. So we see that there's quite a bit of development happening on the above moderate. 15,000 units in our county have been developed in these, or pardon me, approved and already as part of permits. But when it comes to the development of affordable housing, that's very, very low, 269 units and 402 units at low, pardon me, and about 1,000 units at very low. So compared to the 15,000, it's about 10% or a little bit less than 10% of that, right? So there has to be affordable housing that moves along with market rate housing to ensure that we're having housing options at all income levels. Next one. We can go on to the next one. So these are some of the trends that we have seen in this cycle, where there is a lot of activity around density bonus, surplus land act, emergency shelters, accessory dwelling units, inclusionary housing ordinances, congregational overlays, now what's called SB4, and what they called overlays or rezonings to make sure that there's sufficient sites for housing in general. Next slide. We don't have to go into those. These are examples or definitions of these different tools. We can go to the next one. We can go to the next one. Next one. And I did want to pause quickly on the ADU slide, because we are seeing quite a bit of ADU being built in our county, and it's also being reported as low and very low, which is something the state statute allows cities to do. But the surveys that are also being taken in terms of rents that are being charged for some of the ADUs is very close to market. So I think we have to be aware that ADUs are a powerful tool, but there has to be an intentionality of creating affordability in those if we're trying to address affordable housing needs through ADUs, right? When it comes to market rate units, that's going to be it is a great tool to be able to address that. And now that it's evolving to a homeownership level, it's even going to be more impactful. But I wanted to be mindful that when it comes to low, very low, it has to be a deed restricted type of development to effectively address that population. Next one. We can go to the next one. That'll be part of the packet. Next one. And next one. Next one. And we can go to the next one. So I just want to wrap it up by giving you a couple of quick examples of where do we go from here. I think it's advocacy and the implementation of these key programs, policies in each of our cities that's going to be impactful. It's a way to address housing needs, housing needs at all income levels. Pardon me. At all income levels, but we can't forget that in order to address, pardon me, these housing needs, there's an overarching structure that requires state, federal, and local resources to address our critical housing needs in general. I think local governments play a crucial role in zoning, in the implementation of core programs, but when it comes to funding of affordable housing, it really is an issue that is pertinent to the state and to the federal government, where there are different programs and funding sources that are key to addressing our housing needs at all income levels. And I just want to recognize currently at the state level, we have a state budget that has $0 for housing when it comes to affordable housing. And that's a key area where we all have to be mindful and be able to push hard right now with legislators and with the governor that the May revise has to include affordable housing funding and programs to address homelessness and affordable housing. Our coalition of statewide partners has put forth a recommendation that they be at least $1 billion in investment to affordable housing and homelessness to make sure that we continue the progress that has happened. When it comes to the state, there's also a housing bond being proposed for 2026 that will provide $10 billion in funding from homeownership to homelessness to affordable housing. So those are going to be key areas and opportunities for investment. And at the federal government, we have to recognize that our federal programs are a threat with funding from HUD, home, CDBG money, which is pertinent to the development of affordable housing and services in homelessness, and recognizing that the layoffs that are happening at the Department of Housing Community Development at the federal level are creating a lot of uncertainty, are creating also a gap in knowledge of individuals who can help move certain programs forward. And we have to be really active in those spaces to make sure that we recognize the opportunities to do the advocacy. So let me stop there, but I want to thank you all for your partnership on this and looking forward to partnering with more of you.
Thank you, Cesar. That was great. You all have given us just so much information to think about, and we have numerous questions for you. So a very general one, let's start out with, whereas Daniel Dobkin had asked, how many houses have been built between 23 and 24 versus 10 years earlier? I don't know whether you have those numbers. How many people are homeless, struggling to find a place to live? I think that just the total unhoused number is somewhere around 180,000 statewide. I don't think we have the newest numbers on that. And then what is the total housing in the state and how short are we? Anybody have that? I started looking at some things.
I could take a swing on a couple of them, right? We've got 40
Okay.
million people, and I'm looking to the other panelists here. I believe it is somewhere in like the 15 to 18 million unit count total. And depending on which analysis you're looking at, the one that the governor often references comes from a McKinsey report, which references a 3.5 million unit shortage. So that's a 20 to 30% increase on our overall housing stock. Production today is very, very low, especially compared to where it had been. It ebbs and flows with the economic markets. But really, in California since the 1970s and 80s, compared to, call it the post-World War II, we are producing way less housing over the last 40, 50 years than we did in that post-World War II era for a variety of reasons. And just being realistic, I mean, Cesar said it, like we are not going to be able to produce, especially the affordable stock that we need, without significant increases in state and federal funding. I mean, it is not, the gap is so significant based on the need.
And Corey, that gap, that McKinsey study was from 2016,
Yeah, maybe 10 years ago now. So
Yeah.
it's probably larger.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I think, wasn't it like we needed to produce 180,000 homes annually
Annually. Mhm.
to meet that, but we're producing 80,000 or less or somewhere around there.
Right.
So we have a huge deficit.
But we do have the blueprint. I mean, the ADU program undoubtedly is the thing. It's the only thing, frankly, that's working relatively well in California housing right now, because of the things that were laid out in the Casita Coalition, the work that they're doing, right? It's, you have that first barrier, you see, okay, what works well, what doesn't, and it takes time and it takes progress, but that really is the model that works, and it's proven that it worked.
Miles Pomeroy wanted to know how many people Orange County has working to keep up all that information and all those data files. Because we try to have observers in every city taking in what each city council does. And it's hard to get all that, so.
Yeah. We have around 6 staff members and a lot of volunteers. But I think our goal is exactly that a lot of this stuff is very challenging to understand. So we have to be able to simplify it and give those advocates simple tools that they could use, right? And break down that data. So I would highly recommend that you partner with someone who can provide that for you.
Question from Gwen. Corey, when you were talking, you had, when did HAC start monitoring cities' compliance with housing targets? Was it 20 years ago? Was it just this last housing element?
Yeah, I mean, it's the current cycle, because before it was a plan and it doesn't mean much. And so it was an academic exercise, more or less, that cities had to go through. And so it's really been this cycle. And I mean, again, we try to look broadly. We rely a little bit on the same, it's neighborhood activists, it's people within communities trying to get information to the general public. I will say for the cities where we've got litigation, active litigation, there's a better documented history of bad actors, if we're being totally honest. With some cities, there's some cities that are very good, that are working very hard to achieve these things. There's others that aren't. The most egregious one I believe I came across, and I don't think it made it across the finish line, but a city at one point on their site inventory listed every post office in the city, saying every post office is going to get redeveloped into a multi-family, multi-story apartment building. And it just, doesn't pass the bullshit sniff test. Like that's not realistic. You got to do the thing that we're asking you to do. Give us real sites, give us real opportunities so we can build.
Is there a way that you can ensure the developer members of your coalition remain committed to affordable housing development and mixed income neighborhoods, communities, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, so we have both for-profit market rate developers, but then we've also got not-for-profit 100% affordable developers. So we really try to push kind of across the entire spectrum. Part of that can be done building by building, but we're also huge believers in mixed income buildings when you can create those opportunities, whether it's through a cross subsidy or something else, to get a variety of incomes into an actual building. A lot of that is regulated by state law, but generally speaking, there is a bifurcation between people who build 100% affordable housing and people who build market rate housing. And we just need to be doing, in our mind, as much as we possibly can of both, knowing that really the finances and the funding and the resources are, all of the, it's the line that was a famous sports writer used, the answer to all of your questions is money. Like, to build housing, it all comes down to money. It all comes down to dollars and cents. And, the bond is important. We totally agree. The initial budget was inadequate. We put in a letter for it. We've got to get more money into the system to do these things. And it can be done. We do have the capital in California to solve this problem, should the political will exist.
I would also want to add to that we also have to look at land use and decisions that local governments make differently. when you are doing what they call rezonings, you're changing from office to now residential, there's a different value there you're transferring to those properties. So there should be a community benefit that your community gets back in exchange for that, right? And in our case, we believe it should be affordable housing as part of that. There could be others, parks, open space, and other amenities that are important, but we really should look at planning through a community benefits lens to ensure that we're getting products that everybody needs, but also benefits that everybody can enjoy.
Leslie is asking, what happened to public housing? That is, my tax dollars going to public housing. No one I know who is houseless or housing insecure can afford affordable housing. And why are we privatizing public lands?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting model because in most of California, that maybe larger cities like San Francisco and LA, we did have quote unquote projects at some point. Those are getting redeveloped. But that is the big question. The way that we address affordable housing, the way we build affordable housing is really through a structure that provides tax credits and also other financing that still has a huge gap. So you have to have individuals who are working, who have income, and are going to pay their share of rent. And it's very competitive, right? To do that. Every time we build 1,000 units, pardon me, 100 units, there's 3,000 people on that waiting list who are qualified and just cannot get the chance to go into those units, right?
And then, Cesar, there's the added issue. One of the things that when we talk about home ownership, I mean, there are people in affordable housing that have reached incomes where they
Right.
should be homeowners, but there's
Right.
no housing for them to be able to become homeowners.
Very true.
And we were to find a solution for that tier of affordable housing tenants that could free up more housing for the
More
people. That
housing. Agreed. We need to work on that part.
Renee asked, the housing element requires that extremely low, very low, and low income families are identified. Why do the cities ignore the housing needs of the extremely low and very low income families?
I think it's because they're the most challenging to reach. But that's where the advocacy is really important, right? You need to be at the table from the beginning when you're starting these housing elements, housing plans to say, here's the data. And what we do is we take the data from their own consultant, their own housing element. And you say, you identified, I'll give you an example, City of Santana, 80% of the population falls into low, very low. Okay, so then your housing programs have to be responsive to 80% of that population. And so we have to be able to be at the table to make sure that's recognized. If we're not, then it's just going to be ignored.
and
Please.
just real quick, and I'm going to add, I mean, it goes back to what Corey said earlier about money. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the most expensive to build. And the Turner Center did a few reports on making it pencil that I highly recommend all of you look at. It is very expensive to build every unit for that income bracket. And money is what we're at a deficit of right now. So that's probably the biggest driver for why.
And typically speaking, affordable housing on a per unit basis, especially in big cities, is more expensive to build than market rate housing. In a place like San Francisco, there's a project going up down the street. It's going to open up this year. It's going to be fantastic. It's 181 units, I believe, is the total count. 80% of the units are going to be low-income family units, and then the other 20% are going to be set aside for something we call TAY youth, transitional age youth. So it's 18 to 24-year-olds. People who are not technically speaking kids anymore, but it's an 18 to 24-year-old. And if anybody has 18 to 24-year-olds, you might claim that they're fully kids still. And in that, and it's right next to Golden Gate Park. It's beautiful. It's 8 stories tall. It's a big, beautiful building. And the construction cost, now these are bigger units, is $1.1 million per unit to build. To build the thing is $1.1 million per unit. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Material costs have just skyrocketed the last few years, the cost of wood and concrete and steel and everything like that. Because it is a place like San Francisco where there's limited land, the land cost is up. Because in a place like San Francisco, we believe in paying workers a living wage, and a living wage in San Francisco is expensive because it's an expensive place to live. It was also a project that began, the city acquired the site at the end of 2015. It is now 10 years later, and it is just getting completed. So that it's just taking a long time to build it adds to the overall cost. And we're not going to charge residents living in that deed restricted low income housing anything close to covering the cost of a 1.1 per unit cost. And so there's that gap on that, right? So it's not what's called hypothetical dollars. It's real money that then affordable housing builders need to, and this is true, literally cobble together funding sources, a dozen or more funding sources to pay for the affordable housing, because there's no one place to go to get the money to build affordable housing. It gets pieced together over a long period of time. And it's just like scaling that system in California is just really, really hard. And that's why having some state dollars that are consistent, having some federal dollars that are consistent, and simplifying that process has to be needed. We will not, again, solve this problem unless we can actually get to that core issue.
Would co-op housing models work in California?
It's hard to get funding for co-ops is what I've heard from co-op developers.
Yeah, I think there is a push for that, and there's been for some time. It's just the financing structure is a bit more challenging.
Even if land is available, can low-income housing be built without subsidies? How is it determined who can live in subsidized housing?
Yeah, as Corey mentioned earlier, usually when affordable housing is built, it's at least 4 to 7 different funding sources that are needed for that. So it is a bit more challenging to build it. I'm sorry, I'm pondering the question. Can you repeat the question again?
Oh, gosh, I just scrolled down. Hold
Oh,
on.
sorry about that.
I can get one of them was who gets to live in
Who gets to
affordable
live
housing?
there?
How do
Yes.
you determine that?
Yeah. So usually for affordable housing, individuals have to qualify under the income limits that we shared earlier. And it depends on the financing for affordable housing, how those individuals may be selected. So if it's 100 units, you may have 60 of those units available for very low or for low. So they're designed where families are going to be paid 30% of their income towards rent, and they have to fall within those income categories.
And you can search just your county, and what you search for is the area median income chart, or AMI chart, and you can see the actual specific dollar amounts for your individual county. That's all a math formula that, as Cesar mentioned, is released every single year.
Yeah. What was the first part of the question, Terry?
I'm sorry, I'm on to the next one.
Okay, let's move
I
on.
can read it if you need me
Yeah,
to. I
if
saw
you
pulled
have it in
up.
front of
Yeah,
you, yeah.
yeah. The first part was, even if land is available, can low income housing be built without subsidies?
Yeah. No, the answer is no. There has to be multiple layers of subsidy and investment as part of that. But that is part of the puzzle, right? When you look at the cost, as Corey mentioned, it could be $1 million for that unit. I don't know the specifics about that, but if a city has land or a county has land, then you're able to at least address partial cost of that through the land subsidy and the availability of that. And then the developers have to come up with a strategy to get different funding. As was mentioned earlier, that development in San Francisco has TAY. There probably is some specific money available for that population that they're able to leverage into that. And we're seeing a lot of that happen here in Orange County and throughout the state, where affordable housing may have 15, 20% of the units available for permanent supportive housing for those formerly homeless or for those unhoused, because there has been consistent funding from the state to address that issue through Project Homekey and Roomkey and a variety of other programs that are focusing on that. So you'll see those different layers of finance to put it together.
And I can argue that ADUs do provide naturally affordable housing, the natural occurring affordable housing without subsidy. That is an option that's out there. I was also just in Austin and just went through this amazing community called Community First, which was this. It was a tiny home lot development that was built without any public subsidy. It was all philanthropy funded. It was an incredible site, really. There are beautiful tiny homes, and it was a beautiful community. There's a lot of services that were provided within the compound. I mean, there's models that we've seen around the country, but the lack of zoning in Texas is what we don't have in California that allows for that.
And here's a question from Dora. Ezra Klein argues that the real scarcity in America isn't resources, but permission to build, to grow, to solve problems at scale. How can the YIMBY movement harness that abundance mindset, not just to fight housing scarcity, but to build broader political support for systemic reform across infrastructure, climate, and governance?
Oh.
Man,
A big
loaded
question.
I'll start on this one a little bit. So we're certainly big believers. The abundance kind of concept that came out there is from an advocate saying we need to add more supply is like, yeah, no kidding. There's some intersections on it that are really, really critical, though. Number one, understanding how power works within communities and understanding who gets to make these decisions and how we go about building and where we go about building. We're big believers that the development industry in California has a horrifically racist history that quite literally plowed through communities and destroyed communities. And so while it is certainly important to be building, trying to figure out how to do so in the right way is also actually just as critical, and holding people accountable to actually do what they say they're going to do and deliver outcomes that really benefit communities. That has just not been kind of what happened in the past. The other piece to it that's not particularly housing related, but is kind of part of that question. I read a different book. I did not actually read Abundance. I sort of know what's in it. There's another book called Why Nothing Works, and it posed this really fascinating question
Yeah, it's a really good book.
that I really liked, and it basically is at this point, I'm a believer personally. I want government to be able to do big, bold things. But I, like many other progressives and liberals, don't necessarily trust the government that we have today to do big, bold things. And so we need to be, and this is the point of the abundance concept and Why Nothing Works, a little bit less process oriented and a little bit more outcome oriented. But that conversation about what outcomes actually benefit folks needs to be done collaboratively, number one, but also just simply faster. And that's really, really hard. And that's a challenge of government and the advocates to try to move the ball up the hill in a speed that matches the urgency, while at the same time not repeating mistakes of the past.
It's also critical to recognize that the way you create political will is through education. It's also through engagement, and sometimes it's through enforcement. As we talked about earlier, these housing plans or elements are a starting point to engage decision makers and educate them on these issues, take them on this journey and come up with solutions together. But there's also opportunities where you're going to be faced with cities that don't want to do anything different, don't want to change the way they traditionally do decisions on housing. And that may require a different approach. It may require litigation. It may require that you work in concert with the Attorney General or the Department of Housing Community Development. So there's political will needs to be built in a variety of ways, and we have to be strategic about that.
Okay, we have some climate folks here as well, and their concern is infrastructure as well as how are we considering our upcoming water shortage situation? How are we taking those things into account as we add more and more housing?
from an environmental sustainability point of view, we know that urban infill housing is, from a per capita carbon footprint point of view, the absolute most environmentally sustainable way to be growing. We know that people who live in cities near jobs are more likely to take public transit, reducing the total number of cars and CO2 pollution that's on the road. There's data actually also that gives the strong belief that people who live in cities take shorter showers than people who live in rural and suburban communities. And then you add in things like yards and other stuff that take up water. If we're concerned about a water shortage and an infrastructure shortage, it makes a lot more sense to try to bring people to the place where we already have those things. Because the reality of what is happening, there's no fewer people that are actually getting born. The people are just moving to different places. And so Houston, Texas is sort of the example that is often used kind of at the end of the spectrum, where you can build whatever you want in Houston. And they built a lot of housing. And it is an incredibly racially diverse city. It is an incredibly socioeconomically diverse city. It is also a very sprawly city at the same time. And so that carbon footprint is really notable. And so it's about, again, kind of finding that right balance, because the people are here no matter what. On the planet. And so it's, how do we house them in the most environmentally sustainable way? And there's no one solution that's going to work for everybody, right? Not everybody's going to want to live in a backyard ADU. But I tell you, my former boss, who has a backyard ADU, all of his kids have now left. He's rented out to a school teacher. He is ready at the point in time to then have him and his family move into that backyard ADU so he can rent the house to another family that needs the space. So that's a perfect solution for that type of person. And we just need to have more options like that for people.
Yeah, and Corey, people who live in smaller homes also use 45% of the energy over time. And we would think that, it's per usage per people. We aren't adding more people to California. We're actually seeing an exodus of people leaving California. So that speaks to the issue of the shortage of housing.
Suzanne asked, how does the condoization of ADUs help starter families?
Thank you for this question. So the way that this works is, we've been scratching our heads figuring out, how do we ensure that we are creating starter homes? And so we've been talking about lot splits for a really long time. How do we make big lot homes? How do we subdivide it so we can make smaller homes within a big lot? And it's been a nightmare because of the Subdivision Map Act in California to do lot splits. So this gets around all of that. So if we think about the fact that in California, you can really build up to 4, a single family home can have up to 4 units. So it's the single family, it's an internal conversion, a JADU, and a detached ADU. So let's say there can be up to 4 units in a home. What you do is you create an HOA. And so then every single one of those units becomes a condo. So even the primary home becomes a condo. It's a very easy HOA. It is streamlined. You share, you care for the, for paying taxes, for care for the lot, for gardening, all of that. But it's a very simple way to create condos, which we don't build in California because of the 10-year condo liability issue that we have in California. We're not building any condos. And so this is probably one of the only ways to do that. We're seeing in cities like Portland, cities like Seattle, cities like Austin that do this, that these homes become, especially the second homes, the homes in the back, the ADUs become much more affordable units for sale. And then you are able to buy that once you condoize that unit or that lot, then you're able to sell off that ADU as a condo. You're able to buy that condo with regular financing, with a conventional loan or FHA loan, like you would any other condo. Hope that answered the question, but we're really excited about that.
It works.
So I'm sorry.
It works. We know it works.
Yeah.
It's work in other places. It's not like we know it works. It's a great idea for that reason.
So there's a couple of other ADU questions. Do we know how many have already been built? And a lot of people who have built them seem to be renting them to family or keeping them available for visiting family. Is that legal? And you know, a lot of them are also becoming Airbnbs or short-term rentals, and does that necessarily help us?
Yeah, so we know that 113,000 EDUs have been permitted since 2017. That data goes up to 2023. So we're missing some of the most recent data, but we don't have the data that includes all of the EDUs that were built statewide, that were built before the statewide EDU laws were built. Like I said, in LA, there was a ton that were built already before the statewide bills. I do want to reinforce that in California, EDUs can't be rented for terms shorter than 30 days. And also studies show that the majority of EDUs are rented long-term, with about 16% rented at very low or no cost, often to vulnerable family members, which is incredible valuable housing that would otherwise have to be created at a public high cost. I hope I answered your questions.
I could add a couple of things because Cesar talks about something interesting. We've heard this, that some EDUs are being credited as low-income units as opposed to, like, this is all stuff that I think everybody here, like, we want the data to sort of lead to the outcomes that we are intending. And so that's where this iteration continues to happen. And I think there's a bill even this year that is saying some cities, if they are abusing it, should not get to have those units qualify for their low-income housing production. Like, that makes sense. If somebody wants to, rent it out to a family member or another, this concept of an Airbnb and just laid out what you can't do, like, we have other government regulatory tools to tax things like businesses and to deliver the outcomes that we want. And so all of those things need to work in coordination.
Yeah, but I mean, if a person wants to build an ADU for their aging parent, that's still housing that's being built that is absolutely necessary.
100%.
What about like in places in San Diego where they have built ADUs and they don't fit into the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's been a big debate. The EDU bonus program in San Diego has been a hot button issue. It's created a lot of innovation because it creates an unlimited amount of, you're allowed to build an unlimited amount of ADUs if the lot allows for it per deed restricted ADU. So any deed restricted affordable ADU, you can build a market rate ADU. So you have seen, some lots build a large number of ADUs per lot, and it's right now under debate. We just co-signed a letter with Circulate San Diego addressing this issue. Our data shows that the majority of the ADUs that are built in San Diego are still under 4 units. So those are the outliers. So we are working with the city on addressing the outliers and making it easier for families that are building the smaller amount of units, which is actually the majority of the ADUs that are being built in San Diego. How do we streamline that process? How do we make it easier? But that is under debate right now. That is getting reformed. And I saw in one of the questions, a lot of the concerns around that program, those are being addressed by Mayor Todd Gloria right now and in his proposed changes.
Do you know if anyone is monitoring the link between campaign contributions and housing developers getting gigantic tax dollars?
I mean, affordable developers need a lot more tax dollars. So as much as we can pump tax dollars into the affordable housing system, I'm going to be a full supporter of that, and we're going to do everything we can to really maximize all of that out. And market rate builders don't really ever get public dollars. They're pretty much all market rate housing is privately financed, so there's zero public subsidy available to that. Although we've always been really big believers of actually, on behalf of people who represent people who build housing, I would be a huge fan of getting home builders completely out of the political process. If they follow the rules, just let them build their building. We don't need the politicians to weigh in on it anymore. That would be, I think, really good for both housing production and to ensure that, again, home building is devoid of politics. That would be fantastic. I would be out of the job, but we'll figure that part.
Does Casita Coalition have any experience with homelessness, trying to get housing for them?
So we focus more on kind of the homelessness prevention by increasing the supply of attainable rentals. We believe that these help homeowners who are financially vulnerable maintain in their own housing, prevent displacement. That's kind of the focus of the organization. We fully support everybody that's working on homelessness housing right now, because that is a crisis. So we all got to support each other, but we all got to do it all.
We are getting close to 8 o'clock. So one of the last questions I think we're going to have time for is asking about, what are you guys seeing happening with funding, especially at the federal level? We know that it's already tight statewide. Any optimism there?
Repeat that again?
What kind of funding are we seeing coming from a federal level, coming in for housing? Is it already being cut? Do we have any thoughts on what's going to happen?
Through the continuing resolution that was passed a few months ago, there was some optimism that at least you'll have some certainty for the next 6 months, 8 months. But when it comes to the new budget, there's strong agreement that there'll be cuts to the different programs that are necessary for affordable housing and for housing in general. But the biggest impact right now is layoffs, or also giving early retirement incentives to many departments that affordable housing and other housing developers depend on for programs that they implement and the funding that is received. So I think we haven't seen the impact yet, but it's starting to be seen in responses or lack of response from the federal government on key programs.
And I don't want to be, I'm going to go to the doomsday scenario to start and then bring a level of optimism. And talking with my members, the absolute sort of worst case scenario that seems plausible is the elimination of Section 8 vouchers, which are effectively the ongoing subsidy that affordable housing is used to operate their buildings. If that goes away, affordable housing builders who own and operate these buildings will not have the money needed to operate the building, to pay the electricity, to pay for the staff. What happens to the residents living in those homes if that were to happen is sort of this domino of like worst case scenario that is seemingly possible based on everything that we're seeing. A flip side to that, I will say, is an optimistic piece, and I'm going to go to an optimistic result from the November 2024 election was in Los Angeles County with Measure A. Measure A was a sales tax that was on the ballot for voters. It was to renew the sales tax they had, but then actually double it to generate hundreds of millions for homelessness prevention and production of affordable housing. And voters passed that. And considering where voter sentiment is about government right now, the fact that LA County voters decided to say yes to an additional tax, I found to be really fascinating. And so this is coming back to this outcomes-oriented piece. Voters in California want California to solve this problem, right? We get headlines, we're the 4th largest economy in the world. It's like, why the hell do we have 1% of our population sleeping on the street? We have all of this capital and money that exists. Why can't we actually fund the solution that we need? And this is where the coalition work and that community work is so important, because it is possible. Like the smarts exist. It's getting that coalition together and then pushing the political will to fund the problem. And I am a firm believer, if we went to California voters with a plan to actually solve homelessness and to fund that solution, I do think the right coalition coming together, voters would be there. Voters would give over the money to solve the problem, because it's that important.
Agree.
All right. Well, thank you all 3 of you, Corey, Narina, and Cesar, for being here, for giving us all of your time and your energy and expertise. And thank you for all the great questions. We could go on probably for another hour and a half, but I think this is probably the end for today. Before we sign off, I think you will be receiving the recording tomorrow, as well as the slides, and you will have information on how to contact Corey Narina and Cesar, so that if you have questions directly, you can ask them and, maybe potentially work with them trying to get some of this through. Through all of our leagues, there are lots of ways that we can become more pro-housing advocates in our neighborhoods. And with that, as we sign off, I will just remind you that this seminar with all this information was free, sponsored by the State League. And we strongly encourage donations to support the League's critical advocacy efforts in Sacramento and throughout California. It's really helpful. I think Savannah will also be sending out a link for that, just in case you missed one of those emails that came to your inbox. But it's grassroots, so we're all volunteers trying to make a difference. So sometimes when we have to contact state legislation, we need some additional funds to get our word across. So thank you for that, and thank you again for being here, and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Right,
Thank you for hosting
everybody.
this conversation.
Mhm.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks, everyone.